Allez. Bonsoir. We are starting. So maybe we should warn Nicolas. That's working? Okay, thank you to being here. It's my first presentation in English, so please be kind. Tonight we will have yeah, tomatoes, eggs under your seats. Tonight we will have two great speakers. Víctor Carreras from Spain. He's an organizer of the Spanish meetups, if I'm not wrong. He will talk to us about Riverpod. Maybe I can use the slides. Yes. First of all, thanks to our sponsors, Jean de Confiance, who is hosting the night, I'd say. Externatic, who helps us with the food and the drinks, and Zenika, who helps us having the night on YouTube. So tonight, Víctor and Dominik will be our hosts. Víctor will talk about Serverpod, sorry. And Dominik will talk to us about Bluetooth stuff, native Interop. There will be Bluetooth, but that's not the core of the presentation. I will just give the microphone to Jean de Confiance on Externatic so they can briefly present their companies. In French, if you want. In English, if you're proud.
It's very kind of you, Simon. Je vais parler en français. Ça va être voilà. On est très très content de vous accueillir chez Jean de Confiance. Chez Jean de Confiance, on a l'habitude des meet-up parce que ça fait un certain nombre d'années qu'on accueille avec grand plaisir les différentes éditions. Voilà, moi je suis Olivier, je m'occupe du recrutement chez Jean de Confiance. J'ai rejoint l'aventure il y a presque 6 ans. Il y a 6 ans, on était 22, aujourd'hui on est 90, entre 90 et 95. Et voilà, et on est un acteur de la petite annonce à Nantes, avec une équipe tech qui représente entre 40 et 50 personnes aujourd'hui. Et je profite de cette occasion, je fais une micro-parenthèse, mais je recrute actuellement, je recherche un staff app engineer. Donc, si vous avez des personnes dans votre réseau qui ont une vocation, qui sont intéressées, qui n'hésitent pas en tout cas à me transmettre un petit message. Voilà. Donc, un grand merci à vous d'être venu ce soir, et je passe la main à Externatic qui sponsorise la soirée. Très bon meet-up à vous tous.
Merci. Donc bonsoir à tous. Donc moi je travaille du coup pour le compte de l'entreprise Externatic. On est cabinet de recrutement spécialisé sur la tech et les métiers de la cybersécurité. Donc pareil, un peu comme Olivier a pu le préciser pour Jean de Confiance, nous on est un acteur assez important dans l'écosystème, notamment nantais, mais pas que. On est une trentaine aujourd'hui à travailler un peu partout en France. Et donc, on est toujours content, en tout cas, d'aider les Meetup à s'organiser, à faire en sorte que les gens puissent se rencontrer, puisque c'est un peu notre vocation de faire en sorte que les gens puissent se rencontrer, que les entreprises puissent rencontrer également des candidats. Voilà. Donc, en tout cas, bon Meetup à vous. Et puis, tout à l'heure, autour de l'apéro.
Thank you. And we'll start right now with a presentation from Víctor. If you are with us, I will just switch to the presentation. Maybe you can do that. Yeah. Víctor, your turn. Remettre le
Hello,
son.
everyone.
Unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me? Because actually, I think I am not able to hear anything. So if somebody can confirm me, I can start. Yes. Okay. Perfect. So, thank you very much to offer me the possibility and to be always so kind, supporting me from here in Spain. It's a really pleasure to be with all of you. I am Víctor Carreras, CTO of mobile development in DCX in Capgemini, Spain. I would like to talk about Serverpod, but before to start to talk about Serverpod, we need to talk about a bit of basics of backend, because the point of Serverpod is, as a brief introduction, is a place where we can is a technology that we can use to communicate, to connect in using Dart with backend and APIs and services. So if we have a Flutter app, don't care if it's desktop or mobile or web technology, what we can do is to extend these capabilities using Dart, and this is using this lovely technology with Dart using Serverpod. Let's talk around. As backend basics, when we are talking about backend, we are talking about relational databases. That means to store data in tables. We need to store information of our apps, using relations to connect those tables, searching quickly using SQL queries, modeling map data to tables. And this is how it looks like. Actually, a regular app usually has a client app connecting to the API server, and this API server is connecting with a database sometimes, or most of the cases that we will use. What exactly means build an API server? Well, the workaround of Serverpod, we need to serialize our data, for example, using JSONs. This is the regular use case, because usually to have a Java API or .NET or Node.js, in any case, we need to serialize our data. We have to use endpoints and methods. That means we have to create the network layer for our apps. And sorry. And also, we need to load balancing for scalability. That means, because maybe we have an API server working properly, but the number of our users start to increase. What we have to do is our system has to be ready to increase the number of connections. So multiple times we need to use a balancer using multiple instances of our servers, because maybe our users start to operate, I don't know, in Japan or in USA, and in that cases the lack of the connection, it's gonna take maybe more time. And when we are talking global apps or big projects, we have to be ready for balancing apps. So this is our simple example, how is scaling. Actually, would need a balancer. We will have multiple API servers instances around the world, but we only will have a single database, but all of them, our API servers will be connecting for the single database. And sometimes, because the databases are not as simple as, or in performance way, they are not quick. So we have to connect to our cache to work around about this. So, okay, that's the overview regarding backend. But what is the Serverpod overview? All right, the Serverpod overview is just not a single technology for backend development. They build a big project with great apps or part of them that we will love. For example, we will have a logger, is a log viewer where we can read the logs, for example, of our apps. And also we have locally servers with Redis. And also the database, the access is seamless integrations with PostgreSQL. We will see deeper in a short time, but what we have to think in this topic is Serverpod is more just a single technology for backend development. For example, we will have file uploads easily, authentications, data streaming, easy deployments, health checks, and also task scheduling. All right. At this point, what we have to think is we will have a single project where we will serialize the objects, the Dart objects and models from backend to front end. In that, and also the network layer will be shared and automatically generated using Serverpod tools. So easily we will have a full, completely full platform development. I mean, as a universal apps with our front end in any place, and also the backend will be completely related and match with our front end apps. Because as I was saying, our apps will share the network layer and also the endpoints. We will see deeper together. So first, we will have a look regarding this Serverpod. This log is a place where we can connect easily. As you can see, this is detecting the endpoints, detecting methods, detecting the kind of logs, like is there error, or the log level will be collected. Also, we can send more information, as we can see queries into our database. We can split it and select different environments. For example, if we have different apps or we have different environments like UAT or pre-prod or production in a simple way. Also, this is not enough, but this is why Serverpod is built by as a Docker image where we can deploy the full system for development with Redis, with PostgreSQL, without put trash in our systems. I really love that capability because I can play every time without put a lot of things behind. Okay, and also we have to think, okay, how we can install Serverpod. All right, install Serverpod means just as a Dart tool using Serverpod CLI, we can install with Dart path Serverpod CLI and automatically install our dependencies, Serverpod client, Serverpod serialization, Serverpod service client, a lot of them. And we will see activated Serverpod CLI in a specific version. All right, if we try to read Serverpod, we will see Serverpod is installed. Okay. What exactly is, how easy is create a project? Okay. Create a project means just Serverpod create and the name of the project. But before to start, I would like to hold a bit and explain what exactly is doing this command. Serverpod create my pod is creating 3 different projects. 2 of them are more or less clear because we are waiting for a front-end project and we are waiting for a back-end project. But Serverpod will create a new 3rd folder, it means project, where we have our dependencies started between front-end and back-end. That means the backend project will regenerate. We will see how the process. But backend will be able to generate the code from that 3rd or dependency, and the front-end team will update every time this dependency as another dependency in the pubspec YAML file, and then we will have updated changes from the backend and the front-end team. This is exactly how Serverpod works. And now we will see, after create the Serverpod project, in this case is named MyPod. MyPod is what Serverpod is saying is, okay, all set up, start Serverpod by running. So go to MyPod server to run the backend. Compose up your Docker and run Dart project. So if we go to MyPod, we will see MyPod client, MyPod Flutter, and MyPod server. What we are saying with the server, with the front end app, and the dependency. And we compose up our Docker. We will see Redis, Postgre running. We will see 3 different apps running. Insights. This is where we have our logs listening on port 8081. Server default listening, that means our own server using the port 8080, makes sense. And our web server, because this web server is Serverpod, has a lot of capabilities more than a single backend service. It's not a single API technology, because can create a lot of great things. For example, sockets or WebSocket technology, and this is why web server is listening on port 8082. So going to MyPod Flutter, this is the front end app. We can run in a Chrome, like is running just Chrome. We will see a template for when we are sending word to the backend, and the backend is answering us with the hello part, and we are presenting in a text box. This is just an example where you can see the capabilities of this technology, and just with a few commands installing, but with not really too much effort. This is something brilliant. And if we want to know deeper, okay, Victor, what is behind? We need to know exactly, okay, what is the magic behind of this? We can see a config folder where we have split production YAML, development YAML, where we have settings, all the settings for each different environments, development, production, and staging. A password YAML file where we have the automatically generated passwords. This passwords YAML is skipped. We will talk about it later. We have endpoints. This is the example endpoints where we are returning in 19.9 the return hello with a hello method. Also, we can see these models, and in this model we have our own objects. I know a lot of things to understand really fast, so let's take a bit deeper to know them. That means we have a config folder in our backend project. This config folder has different YAMLs for each different platforms. We have staging YAML, production YAML, development YAML, where we have the number of port, the URL, because maybe our staging YAML is deployed in a specific IP or in a specific configuration. But all the passwords are collected in a password YAML in config file. This password YAML is skipped in the git ignore because it isn't to be in our repository. Is not secure, so that's why everything is created by itself. Also, inside of leaf, we have an SRC folder where we have endpoints. Inside of endpoints, we have our own endpoints organized, and we will go deeper in a while. And there is where we have models. This model folder, we have YAML again with a lot of comments, with the name of the class in 11 line. We have the fields, for example, in 22 and 23. So with this information, the endpoints, the models, and etc., Serverpod will read everything and serialize objects from the backend to the front end. And the front end will not have to create network layer with DO or with HTTP, doing the request, serializing from JSON to objects. Everything, all of that will be included inside of Serverpod. That's the amazing technology of it. So, okay, how is generating? Okay, if we go to my pod server, just writing serverpod generate command, we will generate the code, and the front end will have this dependency, and we have to update it to collect our new changes. So that's the point of this technology, because we can include the serverpod generate as a part of a pipeline where we can trigger this automatically. For example, if a PR is done, or so every time when serverpods create, when the backend team create a new PR to create new features or changes in the backend, automatically we can trigger the serverpod generate and automatically deliver new version with this dependency, where the front end team can install for create the changes that they have to do. Or the possibilities are infinitum with this technology. What is what is the effort to create endpoints? Okay, we have to look around this technology. Don't forget, create endpoints has to be located in a specific directory, leave src endpoints. Also, we have to extend endpoint class. So our endpoints must extend. Okay, methods must return a typed future because, well, the request is async, so it makes sense use this promise of an answer. And the first parameter must be a session object. We didn't see it yet, but we will see the first parameter of an endpoint is this session, because maybe the backend team needs to get the IP or to get the session. Everything is inside of this object, and the front-end team doesn't have to include it because this is managed directly by the dependencies in a simpler way. So we don't have to think, okay, I need to create sessions, I need to do any other more boilerplate things, because this is enough. So this is exactly the effort to create endpoints. And if we want to create endpoints, we have to do something like this. We have this class example endpoints, and something interesting is when we create classes for endpoints like this example endpoint, the suffix endpoint of the class example endpoint, I mean this one, will not be the name, generated name, will not be example endpoint, because the suffix endpoint is removed and will only be example. Happens the same with hello. If we want to call in the front end the example class to hello method, this method will not have to send the session, because as I was saying, it will be generated by itself. So what we have to do is just to send the name, and sending the name will be enough. For example, in this case, we are returning the name passed by this parameter as a simple way. But we will see more interesting things. But okay, what is the effort to do this working on the front end? Looks, calling endpoints methods is as simple as it looks like. You directly will have in the front end this client. If our dependency is updated to have the last changes done by the backend team, we will have this client object calling this example. We will have this example endpoint calling this hello method, passing just a single parameter, and the result automatically will have this string object returned. But we can send a lot of things because we are serializing data. We are sending Dart objects from the backend to the front end. So the models are defined in YAML files, where we will see the flexibility of this. The models are in a specific directory, like happened with endpoints inside of live src, but now in the models, not in the endpoints. And just running Serverpod generate to make models accessible if we want. And this is an example of our YAML model. In this case, we have a company class, and the fields are name as a string, founded date, an optional date time, and employees. This is a list of employees. Don't forget, if we want to serialize objects serializing another objects or inside as a part of other objects, what we have to do is just to serialize or create these models firstly, then we can include them in another as a part of another objects. This is how it works, serializing data in a lot of languages, and is not different in Dart. Looks, this is something simple. We can create a company, sending the name, sending a list of employees, and sending the new employee. And now we can access all of the properties, name or the list of employees, simplest. But what's going on if we want to connect with the database? Because until now, we didn't see anywhere where is our database. Hold on. The database was used before in the logs, because the first table created in Serverpod is for loggers. The logger table, this is where we have our own logs. So this is the first use of our database. But what's going on if we want to storage models? Well, if we want to storage models, we don't have to create SQL queries, because Serverpod create a great technology to do this easier using just this field. If we add this table and the name of the table as a part of our models, when we use Serverpod generate, automatically our database will change with this, creating the tables if it was not created, and doing the changes in a simpler way. But okay, using database is sometimes tricky because we have to use migrations. Don't worry, because Serverpod is thinking regarding this topic, and we can create migrations. Actually, we just create a migration of our database. And also we can do the opposite, and we can apply migrations. So in this case, we are applying migrations. So this is completely a workaround regarding databases. If we want to create things like, for example, okay, Víctor, but how can I receive the name, for example, in the previous example, with the name or company name, and we want to store it in a database? It's easy, really easy, because we can create models, and in that models, we can access to the database and insert rows like this, accessing to the object. We have this database property, .db property, inside of company, because in the company table or model, we add the table field where we can automatically, using Serverpod generate, we will have everything ready with this database method, and with a lot of methods for persisting data, updating, adding, removing, decrude, create, read, update, and remove will be managed with this technology. But don't forget, this is not thinker to be used in a front-end app. We have to use this technology in the backend, this specific persisting data, because the capabilities to access to the database is not directly from the front end without passing the API. No, you have to use your endpoints in the front end app, and then you will have the capability to do this in this part of the project in the backend, where we can access to the database in a simpler way. But this is not the single command that we have, because we can find by ID, for example, the company, or we can find first row and we need to filter by something like this. But what's going on? Let's think. Let's put an example. For example, we have exceptions. For example, an issue was created. What can I do? We can serialize exceptions like this. So maybe your request is creating exceptions inside of the API, and it doesn't matter because we can serialize the exceptions from the backend to the front end, and front end can address this properly. So you don't have to send me an error inside of a success request, for example. This is something that I really love. Also, we can serialize enums. We can create enums like this. And also, for me, I really love this when we can create models with documentation. That means if we use this notation of comments, we can include them when we use Serverpod generate. In that case, our objects from the backend started with the front end will have translated this in comments where the front end team can read the explanation of the objects and the fields. And the point here is, and what's going on if we have models that we don't want to share with the front end team? For example, let's think about we have an employee object, and in this employee object we have personal data like credit cards or banking numbers that you don't want to share because the front end is not using it. What the backend can do is hide properties or classes. Any. Both can be hidden. In that case, the properties will be nil and the objects will not be generated if we hide the full class. And that's all from my side. I don't know if somebody wants to, or if the meeting can be used to answer questions, or maybe after. But that's all from my side and from the Serverpod.
Can hear us. Can you see me? Camera is here. Yeah. Thanks a lot. That was very interesting. Yes, we'll switch the slides and shut the sound and make a dance and be handsome.
Maybe that's a good moment for like grab some drinks and refreshments, or
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, if you want to grab a drink, you may. So we can
Maybe we'll be
change
back
the slides.
again, We'll be
Yeah.
back in like 5 minutes.
Grab a drink. Just send my sons to Víctor.
Hey Victor, can you hear us? learn a bit more about you. So this is a pretty cameral, small meetup. Although I think you're like the second biggest probably in France, right? Or even the biggest in the world. Nice, congrats. I mean, 2 million here is probably about the members of the meetup, right?
That's the price.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, you seem to have a typo here because it says members, like not members, but members. Yeah, like this is in English, and then it's like members. It's pretty fun. I mean, I love this. I need to have something like this in my office as well. I'm gonna mute myself here. Sorry. And again, the office is great. Love it. Thanks for hosting us. Thanks to Nicolas. Thanks to Simon for inviting me here. I had a lovely time yesterday and today around Nantes. I saw the elephant. I got sprayed by water. It was super nice. The machines and everything. And it's lovely weather. So I come from Warsaw, Poland, and it's pretty grim right now, even though it's springtime as well. But it's like a month before you, or like, yeah, before. So it's just started blooming, and it's super like nice and very lovely to be around Nantes because it's like a wonderful city. Anyway, I wanted to learn a bit more about you. So I know that there are some people from the company. I cannot pronounce this in French, but I know it's like people of confidence. I know that there are some people from the companies, from the sponsors, but I want to know also about the attendees, about the Flutter developers. So there's not many of us here, but like if you could raise hands, who is like working professionally with Flutter? All right, cool. We just have a couple of people that don't. So for you that don't work with Flutter, or maybe don't have the experience just yet, I hope it will be all clear. But today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into like plugins and method channels and how to work with the native platform. So even though this is a Flutter meetup, we will talk more about the native side of Flutter rather than Dart code. So the Serverpod talk was fun, and I used myself Serverpod in one of the projects, and it's cool to have Dart on both backend and Flutter. But I think one of the important parts of being a mobile developer, a Flutter developer, is also to understand Kotlin and Swift, and maybe sometimes Java and Objective-C. And I know that some of you come from the kind of Android and iOS background, so you know how it feels to write native apps. And I hope this will also be insightful for you to learn how it operates with Flutter. So Flutter native interop means like how Flutter interoperates with the native platform and what can we do to make it easier. Obviously, at the beginning, there's a bit of a introduction. So I'm a GDE in Flutter, which means I'm a person that attends a lot of meetups and conferences to talk, to preach about Flutter. And it's super fun to be able to do it and like visit cities like Nantes. You can find me online on my website. This is a Polish surname, Roszkowski.dev. And you can find some materials about the talk there and some blog posts and stuff like that. Currently, I work at this company called Visible, where we have our Bluetooth wearable tracker for people with long COVID and other chronic illnesses. We have an app. We work on also with the backend and stuff like that. Pretty successful, I must say, with thousands of users and so on. So really fun and challenging thing. Flutter plugins. So for those that don't know, with Flutter, we typically have our dependencies as packages. And typically, a package will contain only Dart code. But for the plugin, you will also have a code in Android, for Android in Java in Kotlin, and for iOS, it can be in Swift and Objective-C. And what is really cool about Flutter is the fact that, for instance, comparing to some previous technologies that I worked with, like Xamarin, and I think Xamarin was also pretty popular in France back in the day. So with Xamarin, there was a lot of magic with how the project was built. Whereas with Flutter, you just get your native projects. So you get your Android and iOS project, and you can just write Java or Swift code easily. And plugins also come with the same setup, where you just have piece of code in Dart and piece of code in native language, and just some glue code between them, which is very simple, sometimes a bit cumbersome because you have to write a lot of code manually. But in the end, it's very clear what's going on. If you have your foreground service on Android, you just write it in Kotlin, and it's understandable to any native developer. Likewise, if you want to show a home screen widget on iOS, you just write an iOS extension, and there is nothing preventing you from integrating with that. The problem is the verbosity of that, the kind of simplicity to the point where you have to write a lot of the code, either manually or use some code generations, etc. But it's like one of the best points about Flutter is like how kind of well architected it is, and it expands to all the other platforms like Windows and Linux. And the different APIs that you can have with your plugins can be called with different ways. So for instance, the basic one that anytime you start a new plugin, you would use something like method channel, which is essentially message passing between Dart and native platform. So you have some message encoded in some way as a JSON, as a binary data, as some custom codec, and you pass it to the native side, receive it on the native side, handle this. It can be a string name of a function. It can be a JSON payload. It can be anything. And if you want to repeatedly send some data, you don't want to invoke a callback many times. You just have an event channel that will stream the data one way or the other. It's like the basic one that you would use, and it has a lot of different codecs that you can use to optimize the communication. Then a couple of years ago, there was an effort to make it a bit more approachable to developers, and it's called Pigeon. It's a library that allows you to create a contract between your Dart side and the native side. So similar to what we saw in Serverpod, you define a class, and then this class gets generated in Dart, in Java or Kotlin, and in Objective-C and Swift. And this way, you don't have to write the serialization code yourself, the glue code. And you can also create methods to invoke them and so on. I also saw some people using protobufs and flat buffers to communicate between native platform. And this is probably more useful for like high throughput data. And also maybe you want to send some data from the backend to the native side, but through the Dart code, then you can reuse the same protobuf definition across different layers of your stack. I think 2 years ago, stable version of something called Dart FFI appeared, and this is again elevation of what is possible with native interoperability with Dart, which means you can invoke C functions directly from Dart. It's called Foreign Function Interface, and it's been available for Java and other platforms for years, where like you can essentially consume any C library. And this opens up a lot of different possibilities, because if you have access to a C library, you can now kind of do this roundabout way to interact with any other language that interacts with C. So for instance, you can interact with Objective-C, which is kind of a superset of C. And if you can interact with Objective-C, you can interact with Swift. So obviously, it goes a little bit, it's a bit of detour, but this opens up a lot of different possibilities to interact. And then there's something else that I'm going to show today. So method channels and event channels, they are pretty easy to pick up, but the problem with them is that they are always async. So if you, let's say, have some synchronous API on the native side, let's say you want to get the battery level, you want to show a notification, you want to, let's say, get metrics data from iOS to see like what is the battery performance and stuff like that. These are synchronous operations if you write them in Swift, in Kotlin, elsewhere. However, because method passing through method channels is asynchronous, there's just a it gets orchestrated by the Flutter engine. You don't really get to make it synchronous just now. Even in the basics of code, if it takes like a 1 nanosecond, you will still have to call this with async await. It will change soon, because there was this effort to make something called platform merging, which means that now the Dart code and the native code will run on the same thread. But that's not really yet available for plugins. Like we have pretty extensive app right now with foreground servers, with background processing on iOS and stuff like that. And for the past 2.5 years, we wrote all of our native communication with method channels and event channels, and it just works. We don't need anything fancier than that. And what is like, this is an example of just a method channel call. A bit verbose, like you get like on the top, you can see that I'm just invoking the method with a string parameter, so it's not really type safe. You can make a typo. Instead of calling members, you say members, right? And then on the native side, you also can make a typo. You can forget about some method name. Very flaky. It works if you have a small team. There's like 3 developers at my company, so we can manage that. But the moment you have 20 or 50, it will not work. It will not scale. However, some people ask about the performance, and in fact, it's pretty fast. So there's a demo here of essentially a game of Snake that you have. You use your gyro for in Dart. So it's very high frequency data, essentially as fast as your gyro allows for. And it just comes as quickly as it arrives. So it's like a 7 nanosecond. You can see it's like currently, if for the game for 20 milliseconds, like it just spits the data as quickly as it arrives. And typically for most of the use cases, you will not notice the bottleneck of the method channel. Although some, like for instance, if you would have to stream binary data from the camera to Dart, then method channels can be a bottleneck because you may end up with copying data. And you want to make sure that if, let's say, texture has been created, you don't copy it over. You just access this directly, like at the frequency, for instance, of your camera feed. Then Pigeon and protobufs. So I don't personally, I'm a big fan of that. Like, I think it was a very like noble effort to make that work, because we really needed to have an official way, because Pigeon is just endorsed by Flutter team and created by Flutter team. We really needed a way to have a type-safe communication channel between Dart and native platform. But at least for me, the fact that you have like this special piece of code in Dart that is not really part of your app, it's not that nice as, for instance, the Serverpod example, where you can just consume single class across server and mobile client. It's like this, there's a special class that you define, and then out of that, there is a code generated. So there is a certain detachment. And for me, it was always a bit like not really following the patterns of packages in Dart. It was like outside of the paradigm that you would normally have, even for the code generation. And the complexity of that, it's not something that I really enjoyed. Although you're free to play with that if you want. And this is like a stable, endorsed by Flutter team. However, one thing that Flutter was always missing was something that other platforms had for a very long time. I mentioned, for instance, Xamarin. You were able to invoke the native code directly. But even the newest addition to the market, Compose Multi-Platform, they already have something called kind of native interop with Swift. So we can create bridges to Swift code. They come essentially for free with the library that you're using. On the left-hand side, you can see an experiment that they have currently, which is essentially allowing you to write Swift UI views in Kotlin. So not only Swift UI, which is relatively new on the market, but also you can write them in Kotlin. Obviously, probably not many iOS developers would like to write Kotlin, but if you have an Android developer that understands the basic of Swift UI and you want to share the code, there's a obviously experimental, very early in the development, but you can create a composable view being a Swift UI view underneath in Kotlin, which is, I think, bananas. And then on the right-hand side, you see kind of non-UI code, where if you ever work with iOS, you know that there's like in Flutter you call it shared preferences, but on iOS you call them user defaults, which is essentially a dictionary of keys and values. And you can access that directly from Kotlin without creating a glue code to Swift or Objective-C. So in Kotlin, you can just instantiate your new NS user defaults and just get the instance of that. And this is a synchronous operation, same way as in Swift. And I will never understand the magic behind that. because essentially you have a Kotlin running in JVM that is able to access an object that is running like on Swift thread, but they do it. The convenience of that is kind of incomparable to method channels, and it's like already available. You can just create compose Kotlin multi-platform library and access iOS APIs directly. And a lot of let's say you would like to manage your passwords with Kotlin on Mac. You can do this right now directly using the Foundation APIs. Again, it's not a good kind of perspective for Flutter right now, but at the same time, I'm going to show you something in a second that maybe will change how you look at this. Again, another example of Swift API in Kotlin. So for instance, you import platform.foundation, and this is absolutely cool. You can access NS File Manager, which is, again, a class from Swift or Objective-C, probably more, and you can just access the file system directly. Obviously, in Dart, you have Dart I/O, so you don't really have to deal with that. But it's more about the possibility rather than necessity. And I mentioned Xamarin before. Like one of the first serious jobs in mobile that I had was Xamarin, and I learned most of the native APIs just writing them in C#. And there was even more magic with Xamarin to make that work. Again, .NET runs in their own, how do you call it? Not VM, but like a runtime. And it also had access to the JVM heap and was able to access the objects on the JVM heap somehow. Same with Objective-C. It didn't have interoperability with Swift. So you had to write essentially sort of Objective-C code in C#, which was a bit nasty, but it worked. And for Android, it was also super easy. You were able to just extend activity in C#. And if you would send an intent to activity, you could receive that. Again, bonkers. And this is how I learned native platforms. Like I wrote my UI kit animations in C# before I did them in Swift. So really cool stuff. And this is a C# example. This is iOS example in C#. Again, very C# code. Like if you ever worked in .NET, you may remember these patterns, but it just worked, lets you access the native APIs. Again, I'm trying to build a little bit of excitement for being able to access these APIs without changing the language. Obviously, like you will always have to know Swift or Kotlin as a mobile developer, but for some cases, it's quite convenient. So can we finally have it in Flutter? And the answer is almost. So I will show you some examples of something called JIGen. And I've been playing with that for a couple of months, since last year when it was showcased on FlutterCon by the Dart team. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a demo so that you can see firsthand how it operates. So I have my Android Studio here. I have my Dart VS Code with Flutter app here. I'm going to make it bigger so that everyone can see. So this is a simple app here. Everybody knows the typical Flutter app. I just have a single main file here. And if I look at my Android Studio, I just have a simple plugin. If you don't know, you can just press right-click Android and open this in Android Studio, and then it opens the project in Android Studio where you can access your plugin code. So typically, when you modify your Android plugin, you do it in Android Studio. Can access the Java or Kotlin code here. Just write it, compile it, and get access to that. But what is super cool as well is that you can attach to the running process. So I have this app running here. It's a simple PDF viewer. And if you ever work with PDFs with Flutter, you know that there's like a dozen different libraries for PDF viewing on Android. So I just created another one. And I have this running right here. So you can see that this app is right now debugging. And I will attach my debugger from the Android Studio as well. So I can see that this emulator runs my PDF viewer. I can attach that. Here it is. And what is this? This is super simple. I'm just opening the page here. I have a breakpoint. So this is just load PDF. So it loads PDF. In this particular case, I'm just loading this from assets. And what you can see here is this class called PDF view controller. And this is what I want to show you right now. So if I go back to my Android Studio, I will find my PDF view controller here. And this is a class that does not have any usages here. This is a Java class in this particular case that has a couple of methods like set page, get page count, get current page, and so on and so forth. And I'm just creating an instance of that here. And if I just have a look here at the memory address of that, so if I look at the example, you can see maybe here, if I scroll here, it's 848FB19. Someone needs to memorize this. So that's the address of this class. And I'm going to probably create some, I have breakpoints here, so that's fine. I'm going to carry on. And here, I see that this method has been called. I'm back here. And if I call this to string, you can see it worked. 848. Can we compare? Can we have our solicitor to confirm that this is the same address?
848FB19.
So this is, again, the first time I realized this, it was super cool because it means that here on the Dart side, I have a handle, because in fact, it's not like an instance of the Java class in Dart. It's a pointer to a class on the native side, of the Java side, that kind of calls themselves to have the exact same address. If we peek into this, you will see that this is a generated code. So it has a reference to the pointer that is a JNI pointer and so on. It's like there's depth to that that's like a normal, ordinary person will never want to understand. But the point being is that I can invoke a Java class directly in Dart and operate on that as if this was a Dart class. And this is my custom class, but you can extend this to arbitrary Java class with some asterisks, like some features are not really supported just yet and so on. It's like a beta function. But I have my app here. And if I go down, I can see it's a, by the way, it's a zero indexed PDF viewer. So the first page is obviously 0. If we go down, we can see that this gets updated. So what happens here, and this bottom view is Flutter. What we can see here is the information coming back from native to Dart. So invoking a function on Java is somewhat understandable, but now we need to make sure that the information goes back. We cannot poll for that. Someone or something on the native side needs to notify us on the Dart side that something has changed, in this particular case, a page number. So a pattern that is currently available for that is just passing an instance of a listener. So what I have here is that I have another class, in this particular case, an interface that I implement, PDF status listener. And if I go back to my Android Studio, just open it here, it's just a public interface with no implementation that has some method names. In this case, it's like on page changed that I care about. And I can pass this class here. You saw this at the beginning with this method set PDF status listener. So this is a kind of sort of listener pattern where I'm passing a listener that will be notified about all of that. And then I'm just kind of notifying here, for instance, it's going to be here on the PDF view. For instance, it uses this quite popular library, Bartek-SC PDF viewer, PDF view. And it has a certain configuration here that if you change your page, you can notify this somewhere. So I'm just calling PDF status listener, which is a static instance on page change. So some state management here has been simplified to just have static fields so that I can access them very easily. But obviously, this can be modified to be a bit more testable. And then on the Dart side, I'm just implementing this interface in sort of not Darty way. Like it's not an instant, it doesn't extend the class of the listener, which I hope they will make this work like that, where I can just say class PDF status listener extends or implements native PDF status listener. Currently, that's the way to do it, where you essentially implement all the method names as callbacks. So here you see on page changed, on loaded, on error, on disposed. You can define that they are asynchronous, so that they don't cause any junk. Obviously, this is super fast anyway, and I can see that if I navigate through the pages, if I go back here to my emulator, you can see that here at the bottom, these prints are getting called. And if I would put the breakpoint here, right, it just works. And I mean, this blew my mind the first time I tried it, and it just opens up a lot of different possibilities. I'm exploring with things like having sort of passing listener to a foreground service. So for instance, when someone taps on a button on a notification on Android, you get information back directly in Dart, or home screen widget, stuff like that. Like, there can be a lot of different possibilities. What is cool about this is that the memory management, like synchronizing the instance between Dart and Java and JVM, is just done by this library. So when you instantiate this, two references will be created, one in Dart, one in Java. When you dispose of the Dart object, its finalizer will let know the binding that it should also dispose the Java object, unless you did tell it otherwise. But by default, this works both ways. Or if the Java object gets disposed, your finalizer on your class will be called. So that's not a common thing in Dart to use finalizers, but there is this thing that you can implement. This method is essentially a dispose in a class. This gets synchronized both sides. Obviously, it may be buggy, it's beta, experimental, but for me, it works. And I'm going to show you a different example. So I have this app, just a hobby app that I maintain. Sorry, it's in Polish, but it's essentially an app that helps you with recycling. And I was just wanted to have a force upgrade or in-app update in the app. So you may have seen that it's like a library that allows you to show the new update in Play Store. There is a nice plugin for that, but it just uses method channels, and I was not able to make it run successfully. But here in this video, you can see an actual implementation in production of that. There is like a debug page in the app that no one else can see. But essentially, I can invoke this directly from my Dart code and get an intent back from here. You can see it just works. And Android works mostly by having like different broadcast receivers and sending intents and so on. So it's very tricky to implement this in Dart. So I'm going to show you how it's done right now. So I have this in the same repo. Let me just make sure that I'm in a proper folder. So here we are, and I'm just going to make it bigger. Let's go to the main. This is just a single file that kind of shows how it's done. And we're just going to look at the init state maybe here. So what I do here is that I create a lot of different listeners here. So I need to implement them. So I get my failure, uncancelled, and so on and so forth. Like installed state, update listener. So some of you may have seen the progress getting notified to the Dart side. So this is what we are getting here. So I can see state update progress bytes cancelled. So we are getting the intents back from native side. And when I want to start this library, I need to get my context, Android context. So there's a couple of convenience methods here. So you can get your current application context and create a reference out of that. And then you can pass it to your factory. I don't have it open right now, but if you look at this, this is essentially the same code as in the documentation for Java. So you can read this as if this was a Java code. And then you get your task to update the app, and you can pass your listeners that I just implemented a second ago. And then I can, for instance, pass the on-flexible update is going to create. I'm going to check if this update is available. And this is all generated code from Java interfaces, Java definitions. And I can start update flow. what is like maybe cumbersome or a little bit not ideal is the configuration file for that. So if you want to generate all of these bindings, you have to explicitly state for what classes you want the bindings to be generated. So it's more like a trial and error. You just add more and more of the classes here to make sure that they are getting generated properly. But that's all essentially. And then you get these bindings. Again, this is not the human readable code, but if I would have a look at the, so I'm in the example here, but if I would look at the library, it's about 6,000 lines of code, of like pretty difficult to comprehend at first. But once you start reading that, it's mostly like creation of different instances from JVM references. And on the receiving intent, so if you want to receive an intent from Android, it needs to have a normal Java class to instantiate. So in order to make that happen, you have to create this sort of empty interface again, this time with implementation that will allow you to pass callback. In this particular case, an instance of this class will receive this callback, and then I will just call it here and here. And then on the native side, if I look for that, you will see it here. So this is this listener that will receive, will be passed to the broadcast receiver, and this broadcast receiver will receive an intent from Google Play saying that this app has already been installed, and you can restart the app to apply the patch. I know that's a lot, but for me, like it was really helpful to understand what are the possibilities of that. And it's coming up soon. Like this is still like a beta work in progress version, but there's examples for showing notifications, interacting with different libraries. I'm trying to create bindings for not only Google Play in-app update, but also maybe for the in-app review, right? It should be pretty easy because you just show a prompt and it just works. The goal here is to have something similar to Kotlin, where you can just import a package like Swift Foundation and just consume all of the APIs. Same for Java, like you could import Camera X directly. That would be cool. Or Crashlytics or something, like without actually having gone through the plugin code. The problem is obviously there's generated code, right? So if I have a look back at my PDF viewer, I'm in the example, I think. If I would go to the packages and here to the lib and to the bindings, it's 700 lines, not much. Here it would be 6,000 lines for a couple of classes. That's a lot. And once you grow this, it can be pretty chunky. So the art team needs to still work on some performance improvements for analyzing generated code, but I hope it will come in tandem together. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Last year, FlutterCon was a sort of preview, and I know that the Dart team is working on that, and I'm playing with that as well. Obviously, another question here is, what about Swift and Objective-C? So I mentioned before that thanks to Dart FFI, you can invoke Objective-C through C, which was possible a while ago. And I'm going to show you as an example of that in a second. For the Swift, they need to have a bridge between Objective-C and Swift available, which is pretty easy. However, there are new APIs in iOS that, for instance, have the minimum iOS version of 15, that they don't have Objective-C interoperability. This is just decision from Apple. They stopped, for instance, I think live activities still have, but some of the newer things like, I'm not an iOS user, but like all the new fancy features, like I think Apple Intelligence, right? This may not have an Objective-C interoperability. But I'm going to show you the Objective-C example here briefly. So for the Objective-C, it's very simple setup. You define what kind of libraries you want to implement. And you can see this is like a draft where I played with like health store, AV audio player, calendar. So I wanted to see which of these APIs are available. But because this generates Objective-C bindings, this code is not really easy to write. Like, for instance, if you want to access HealthKit through Objective-C, it's like hundreds of lines of code to make that work. In Swift, it's just a single invocation, and you just invoke a single class, pass a callback, and you get the data. Objective-C is a bit more verbose and like annoying, but you can, for instance, pass different headers for the Dart FFI tool to generate your bindings. So in this particular case, I'm using a very simple thing, NS user defaults, and I'm using this for Mac, but obviously you could create this for iOS. The problem here is like it's still pretty manual. With JNI Gen, it's automagic. Like it just generates the bindings for you. Here, you have to do a bit of tinkering to make sure it works. But once you have the bindings, and here are the bindings for the Objective-C, 700 lines just to access NS user defaults. And this is the implementation. And then if I have my Dart code, I can just invoke. First of all, I need to load this library, dynamic library. But once I have the library open, I can just instantiate NS user default, or maybe call the static method on the NS user defaults, get standard user defaults, and I can read some value here. And you can see that it's already becoming a bit non-darty. Like you have this underscore at the end, right? Array for key, and it's not really that. And you have to operate an NS array. Like it's a special class, and it doesn't really have that much of comparability with just an array or like a list in Dart. But if you try really hard, it works. And for instance, let me ask you, what would you like to see? What do you want to write in my user defaults? That's the only opportunity you may have right now to write something in my user defaults, which is very personal stuff, right?
We love you.
We love you. Okay, we love you. So I'm gonna save it here under the key Flutter Nantes. Sorry, it's so small. I cannot change the font size of my terminal. And now if I run this, sorry for the play audio is coming from the very beginning of that. And you can see that the print is here. We love you. So again, that's an amazing demo showing that you can access your shared preferences directly from Dart without really having to deal with shared preferences plugin, which, again, I think just expanding this and having this as a package that you can get from PAP, like Foundation or NS user defaults, that gets like auto-generated on every iOS release or whatever, I think that would be a dream come true. Until then, we have to work with that manually, but like it's pretty much very fun. And I invite you to play with that as well. Thank you so much. If you want to learn more, there's some resources on my website. If you have any questions, I believe we don't have any time.
Questions? I have questions.
Go ahead.
Il y en a sûr. Il y en a.
The PDF viewer, was it a native view? Did you use the gen for the native view as well?
So the view is a classic platform view. And I think it's also quite interesting because I had to integrate like traditional plugin architecture for the JNI Gen. And what I'm doing here is, if I have a look at the Android Studio maybe, is that I have my just the platform view factory. So for those that don't know, on Android with Flutter, when you want to create a view that then gets consumed as a platform view, you have something like platform view factory that tells Flutter how to create the view. In this particular case, I'm just returning instance of Flutter PDF view. And this Flutter PDF view is the place that I've shown before, where I create PDF view. And PDF view is just Android view. So I need to have this method that returns the view. And then if I have, so there is like entire implementation of PDF viewer, but doesn't really matter. And here I have my get view, and I'm just returning this view. Then on the Dart side, if you want to have the Platform view, it's also pretty straightforward. I just have Android view here. So there's my widget, PDF view. I just have my platform view link. It's like a lower level approach to creating platform views in Flutter that uses this hybrid composition kind of thing, but allows you to pass gestures, and you get access to like you get accessibility features like screen reader. It's a bit more expensive, but at the same time more like with higher fidelity and things like that. So it's just a classic platform view. Hence, the entire plugin needs to register as a plugin in Flutter. And in this particular case, I'm not registering anything else but just the view factory. So it combines both of these together.
Next step would be to generate a widget.
And pass it like...
Yeah. Well, it would be too difficult, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, please go ahead and try. That would be cool.
With FFI Gen and GNI Gen, do you think it's possible to get direct manipulation of textured data from the native side, for example, to display a map or complex widget or a feed from the camera? And
I think it can have some possibilities. So I know that, for instance, when you have a map and you have markers, typically when you have, let's say, Google Map and you want to create markers, you just have to create like these instances and pass them to the map, but they are not getting copied. Let's say if you want to maintain your markers on the Dart side, you are now creating an instance of a marker on the Dart side that you need to synchronize with the native implementation. So you at least have them twice. And if you do it incorrectly, let's say you copy the list or something, then you may have even more of the instances. So I can imagine this could be a good opportunity if you would like to have, like, be able to access marker data on the Dart side and just kind of have a reference to the Java or Kotlin instance of the marker. I think that could make sense. For the more complex stuff, I think you would still have to write the map code natively. Obviously, like, that's extremely complex topic. If you just use the library, that's easy. But like, if you want to create your own map, that would be very tricky. I mean, yeah, like, would be cool to see some examples of that. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the other platforms, like Linux, Windows?
Oh, desktop
web.
Desktop platforms. Yeah. So I just run Swift Objective-C on desktop, so it works. When it comes to, I think you can, where you can run Java, I think you can run Java this way only on Android. I don't think you can have a JVM. I mean, you potentially can have a JVM app and just invoke this directly, or like JVM library and invoke this directly. I don't know, maybe. Like, let's say you are a big company and you have legacy Java code and you would like to just consume that directly in Dart using the GNI Gen. I suppose it would be possible that you load the library and invoke. I haven't tried it, but that would be cool. On Windows, not really sure.
C?
Yeah, it's going to be C.
C# is close to C.
Although, no, I mean, I wouldn't say C# is close to C. Like, it's C-style language, but
not the same compiler.
Yeah. And also, like, C# can run in .NET runtime, but it can also run without .NET. So, like, it would be tricky to bridging. Although, again, all of these topics would be cool. And I'm just gonna be kind of emissary here for the Dart team. So I just posted this link here, droid.com, blah blah blah. And this is talk by Dako and Hossein from the Dart team. Amazing brains, like super smart people. And they explain the inner workings of what I've just shown with, like, extremely more understanding. And if you're keen to learn more how it works, they are the great people. And both of them are very responsive. So let's say we use the Objective-C and Java bindings in production right now. We have a library that allows you to scan your finger and get the HR reading. And the vendor provides compiled library from Java and in Objective-C. It's a kind of long-running project, but they just have a compiled framework and compiled AAR for Android. And it's even obfuscated, so we don't get to decompile it and see the implementation details of that. But with JNI-Gen and Dart FFI, we were able to generate these bindings and instantiate these classes from Dart and get back the information, let's say, when the reading stops, what is the heart rate of the user, and so on and so forth. For the platform view, we had to do a very similar thing as here, where it's just a classic platform view, and we get the reference to the view or to the UI view from the library. And while doing that, and we were on a tight deadline, like we needed to have it by the end of the month, and like some things were not working. While working on that, we had some issues with Objective-C bindings essentially crashing the app because there was some ZEG fault, that's the proper pronunciation, ZEG fault, segmentation fault, when trying to access some memory because there's just not many users of that, so they were not aware of the pattern that we are following. And they provided a fix for that within a weekend, right? So they were very responsive to that. And the other issue that we had was with Shorebird, because Shorebird manipulates the Dart stack, and Shorebird folks fixed that also within a week. So all of these people are really on the edge of what is possible, and they are very responsive and fixing the issues as they appear. They just need people to use that. They just need someone to tinker and maybe try to consume some obscure Java library or something.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. No more questions. Thank you so much for attention, and let's have some fun time with the beers and everything.
Thank you.